The United States is currently staring down the barrel of a financial gun loaded with $37 trillion of debt. Let that number sink in. 37 trillion. It is a number so large it defies human comprehension. It is more debt than any nation in the history of our species has ever accumulated. It is more debt than the entire global economy produced in a single year just 2 decades ago. But the total number isn't even the scariest part. The terrifying reality is the interest on that debt. We are now paying over $1.2 trillion annually just to service the interest. That is more than we spend on our entire national defense. It is more than we spend on Medicare. It is quickly approaching a point where it will consume the entire tax revenue of the nation. Most people, politicians, mainstream economists, and perhaps even UHR, operating under the delusion that this can be fixed with traditional tools. You hear them debate about raising taxes on the wealthy or cutting government spending. They argue over budget deficits as if we are still in a normal economic cycle, but we are not. We have crossed the Rubicon. Let's look at the math. Even if we tax 100% of the wealth of every billionaire in America, it wouldn't pay off the debt. Even if we cut discretionary spending to zero, the interest payments alone would eventually drown us. The Congressional Budget Office knows this. The Treasury knows this. The Federal Reserve knows this better than anyone. There is no mathematical scenario where the United States pays back $37 trillion in real value. It is impossible. The first door is austerity, massive spending cuts that would cause a Great Depression, political suicide. The second door is default, fusing to pay bondholders, which would collapse the global financial system. The third door is devaluation. They are planning to erase the debt, not by paying it off, but by making the dollars used to pay it worth virtually nothing. They are going to execute a strategic, calculated theft of your purchasing power. But they can't just print money endlessly, or we end up like Zimbabwe or Venezuela. They need a cover story. They need a mechanism that looks sophisticated, legitimate, and deliberate. They need to reset the system, and to do that, they are going to use 2 assets that most people think are enemies of the dollar: gold and crypto. To understand where we are going, we have to look at where we have been. What is happening right now has a specific historical precedent. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It is a documented historical playbook that the U.S. government has used before. Let's rewind to 1933. The United States was in the grip of the Great Depression. The country was drowning in debt from World War I and the economic collapse. Deflation was destroying businesses. The government was essentially insolvent. The dollar was pegged to gold at $20.67 an ounce, which restricted how much money the government could print to bail out the system. So, what did President Franklin D. Roosevelt do? Did he cut spending? Did he tell the American people they had to suffer through a decade of austerity? No, he changed the rules of the game. He issued Executive Order 6102. He made it illegal for American citizens to own monetary gold. He forced every citizen to turn in their gold coins and bullion to the Federal Reserve. In exchange, the government paid them the official price, $20.67 per ounce. Most Americans complied. They handed over their real wealth-hard assets in exchange for paper dollars. Once the government had confiscated the majority of the nation's gold, Roosevelt made his move. In 1934, with the stroke of a pen, he revalued gold. He announced that the new official price of gold was $35 per ounce. Think about the mechanics of what just happened. The government bought the gold at roughly $20. They repriced it to $35 overnight. The value of the gold sitting in the government's vaults increased by nearly 70%. By doing this, they created nearly $3 billion in profit out of thin air on the government's balance sheet, a massive sum in the 1930s. They used this new equity to back the printing of more money, to stimulate the economy, and to technically improve the debt-to-GDP ratio. But who paid for it? The American saver paid for it. The people who handed in their gold at $20 lost the opportunity to see their wealth grow to $35. And the dollars they were given in exchange, Those dollars were now worth significantly less because the currency had been devalued against gold. This was a default in everything but name. It was a transfer of wealth from the private sector to the public sector. It worked in 1933. And now, facing a debt crisis that makes the 1930s look like a minor accounting error, they are preparing to run the exact same play again. But this time, they aren't just using gold. They have a new tool. In 1933, the government only had gold. Today, we are in the digital age, and the government needs a digital asset to balance the books. Enter Bitcoin. For years, they told you Bitcoin was a scam. They told you it was for drug dealers and money launderers. They told you it was rat poison. But watch what they do, not what they say. While publicly criticizing it, the US government has become one of the largest holders of Bitcoin in the world, seizing over 200,000 BTC from criminal cases like Silk Road and Bitfinex. But that is just the beginning. The narrative has shifted. We are now seeing executive orders and bills like the one introduced by Senator Cynthia Lummis proposing Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. The stated goal is to acquire 1 million Bitcoin over 5 years. Why? Why would the US government, the issuer of the world reserve currency, want to hoard a decentralized digital asset? Because they need it for the revaluation. Here's the scenario. The US government quietly accumulates Bitcoin. They seize it, they buy it through intermediaries, maybe they even use national power grids to mine it. They build a stockpile of 1 million coins. Right now, Bitcoin trades around $100,000. That's a lot for you and me. But for a government dealing in trillions, it's nothing. The current market cap doesn't solve the debt problem. But remember the 1933 playbook. The asset price doesn't matter until the government says it matters. The plan is to execute a revaluation event. The U.S. Treasury could announce that for the purposes of national security and sovereign debt collateral. The United States is valuing its strategic Bitcoin holdings not at the market price, but at a model price. Let's say $1 million per coin. Mathematically, 1 million coins at $1 million each equals $1 trillion in assets on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. Suddenly, the government has created $1 trillion of equity out of thin air. This isn't about selling the Bitcoin to pay the debt. You don't sell the golden goose, you use the value of the goose to make your balance sheet look solvent. When the US government sets a floor price of $1 million, the market will rush to catch up. Bitcoin effectively becomes a reserve asset of the United States. This validates the asset, but it destroys the dollar. Because if one Bitcoin is worth $1 million, it means the dollar is worth significantly less than it is today. This is the first prong of the strategy, using a new digital asset class with a finite supply to inject massive liquidity into the system without technically printing money. They are simply marking to market an asset they already control. Bitcoin is the future, but gold is the bedrock. The US government knows that Bitcoin is still volatile and viewed with skepticism by traditional finance. To pull off a reset of this magnitude to erase $37 trillion, they need the ultimate trust anchor. They need gold. The United States officially holds 8,133 tons of gold. That is roughly 261 million ounces. It is the largest stockpile in the world. But here's the dirty little secret that nobody talks about. The US government values this gold on its official books at $42.22 per ounce. Yes, you heard that right. $42. That price was set by statute in 1973 and has never been changed. On the government's balance sheet, their entire gold hoard is valued at a pathetic $11 billion. In reality, at a market price of roughly $2,800, it's worth over $700 billion. But even $700 billion doesn't dent a $37 trillion debt. It's a drop in the bucket. So how do they use this? They pulled the Roosevelt lever. They execute a massive revaluation. Imagine the Treasury Department announces, to restore confidence in the US dollar and move toward a modernized asset-backed currency. We are revaluing our gold reserves to reflect the current M2 money supply. They don't revalue it to the market price of $2,800. They revalue it to the price required to cover the money they've printed. Estimates suggest that price needs to be around $20,000 per ounce. Let's do the math. 261 million ounces multiplied by $20,000 per ounce equals roughly $5.2 trillion. Overnight, the U.S. government's balance sheet goes from showing $11 billion in gold assets to $5.2 trillion. Combine that with the $1 trillion from the Bitcoin revaluation, suddenly you have over $6 trillion in new, debt-free equity. This allows the Federal Reserve to clean up its balance sheet. It allows the Treasury to claim they are solvent. It creates the illusion of stability. It will sell this to the public as a return to sound money. They will say, look, the dollar is now backed by gold again. We are safe. But this is a lie. It is a Trojan horse. Because you cannot have $20,000 gold without destroying the purchasing power of the dollar. If gold jumps 7x or 8x from its current price, it means the dollar has collapsed by 85 to 90% relative to real assets. The backing of the dollar is just a mechanism to justify the inflation that erases the debt. They are saving the sovereign bond market by sacrificing your savings account. This is the part where it gets personal. This is the part where you realize that asset revaluation is just a polite euphemism for theft. When the government revalues Bitcoin to $1 million and gold to $20,000, they are technically solvent. The $37 trillion debt number stays the same, but the value of the money used to pay it shrinks. In nominal terms, the debt is paid. In real terms, the bondholders get stiffed. But who are the bondholders? Pension funds, Social Security, insurance companies, and regular citizens holding cash. This mechanism triggers a massive inflationary wave. And we aren't talking about the 8% or 9% inflation we saw in 2022. We are talking about structural, permanent repricing of reality. If gold is $20,000, think about what happens to the price of oil. What happens to the price of bread? What happens to rent? In this scenario, your salary might go up a little bit, maybe 5% or 10% a year, but the cost of living will double. Your savings account, which holds, say, $50,000, will sit there looking the same. This is the great wealth transfer. It is a transfer from the currency holders, the middle class, retirees, wage earners to the asset holders, the government, the ultra-wealthy, corporations. The winners in this scenario are clear. The government, their debt burden is inflated away. Asset owners, if you own real estate, gold, Bitcoin, or equities, your nominal wealth skyrockets. You survive the storm. Debtors, if you have a fixed-rate mortgage, the debt becomes meaningless. You pay off your house for the price of a used car. The losers are everyone else. The losers are the people who believed the government when they said inflation was transitory. The losers are the people who kept their money in safe government bonds. This is a ruthless, calculated sacrifice of the American middle class to save the American empire. And the most painful part is that it will be legal. It will be passed as legislation. It will be signed by the president. It will be applauded by economists as necessary liquidity measures. When will this happen? It is not a question of if, but when. And the signal suggests the timeline is accelerating. Based on the current debt trajectory and the movements of global players, you're looking at a window between 2025 and 2027. Phase 1, 2025, the accumulation and preparation phase. We are watching this happen right now. The U.S. government is setting up the legal framework for the Bitcoin reserve. They are quietly accumulating. Meanwhile, look abroad. China and Russia are buying gold at a record pace. Central banks bought over 2,000 tons of gold in recent years, the most since 1950. Why? Because they know the dollar reset is coming. They are de-dollarizing before the U.S. pulls the trigger. In this phase, the narrative begins to shift. You will hear more politicians talking about hard money and modernizing the reserves. They are planting the seeds. Phase 2, 2026. The crisis phase. A catalyst is needed. A crisis. It could be a war, another pandemic scare, or a sovereign debt crisis where treasury auctions fail, meaning nobody wants to buy us debt. Interest rates will spike. The stock market might wobble. The media will scream that the system is collapsing. This panic is necessary. It provides the political cover for extraordinary measures. People will be so scared of a total collapse that they will beg the government to do something. Phase 3, 2027. The revaluation, the reset. This is the moment. The announcement is made, the Solvency Act or whatever they choose to call it. The U.S. Treasury announces the new peg for gold and the strategic value of Bitcoin. Overnight, markets freeze and then gap up. The dollar index crashes. Inflation spikes immediately. The debt is technically neutralized. The U.S. government declares victory over the debt crisis, while the average citizen watches their purchasing power evaporate. This timeline aligns with the mathematical expiration date of the current debt cycle. The interest payments become completely unmanageable. By roughly 2026 to 2027, they have to act before the math breaks the system entirely. I have told you the problem. I have told you the plan. I need to tell you what to do. You cannot stop this. Forces at play, the $37 trillion debt. The geopolitical shifts are too big. But you can position yourself to not just survive, but thrive. This is a wealth transfer, and you need to be on the receiving end. Step 1. Get out of the kill zone. The kill zone is dollar-denominated debt assets. If you own long-term government bonds, corporate bonds, or have excessive cash in a savings account, you are standing on the train tracks. These assets are guaranteed to lose purchasing power. Sell them. Step 2. Buy the government's life raft. If the government is going to use gold and Bitcoin to save themselves, you should own what they own. Physical gold. This is your insurance. It has preserved wealth for 5,000 years. When they revalue gold to $20,000, you want to be holding physical coins and bars, not a paper IOU. Bitcoin. If you can stomach the volatility, this is the asymmetric bet. If the U.S. government officially adopts it as a reserve asset, the upside is vertical. It is the fastest horse in the race. Step 3. Secure productive assets. Real estate, farmland, businesses, things that are real. When money dies, real things become more valuable. However, be careful with debt. While inflation erases debt, you still need cash flow to make payments during the crisis. Fixed-rate debt on productive assets is a winning strategy. Step 4. International diversification. Don't keep all your eggs in the U.S. basket. If the dollar crashes, having exposure to foreign markets or currencies can be a hedge. Conclusion. The economy rewind is coming. The $37 trillion debt will be erased, and it will be erased at the expense of the currency. History is clear. No fiat currency lasts forever. The U.S. dollar is roughly 50 years old in its current form since we left the gold standard in 1971. We are at the end of the cycle. The government has a plan to save itself. They are stacking Bitcoin. They're sitting on gold. They are preparing to change the price tags. The only question is, are you preparing too? Or will you be left holding the empty bag of devalued dollars? Fade to black. Text on screen. Don't be the collateral damage.